It's blue, so I had to buy it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today we're going to be looking at the Analogue Pocket Transparent Blue. I've had my black Analogue Pocket for a little while now, and I absolutely love it. But it's not something that I can easily recommend to anyone else. I was going to do a video on it, and then the transparent blue dropped, and I just decided to wait until this arrived. For those that have no idea what this is a Game Boy form factor device that has one of the best screens that I've ever seen. It also can play your Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance carts that just slide right into the back. There's even adapters that you could buy for Game Gear, Neo Geo, Atari Lynx, and others. And this is all without emulation. They're playing off of the actual carts here. And you could even go ahead and buy a link cable so you can simulate what it was like way back when you could just trade things with a cable from Game Boy to Game Boy. The price for this is $219 US for the black version, or $249 US for the blue. But they very rarely have any of these in stock, and we'll come back to that later on. Now for me, I'm personally not using any of my carts at all. I actually prefer using ROMs on this, and we'll talk about what that looks like. So for me, not looking to do anything that's on a cart. So with that, we have the beautiful 3.5-inch 1600 by 1440 screen. That's 10 times the resolution of the original Game Boy. I've had a lot of devices in my lifetime. OLED displays, different IPS displays, plasma displays, and the list grows. This screen is by far and away one of the best I've ever used and continue to use. And it's the absolute best way for me to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and even Game Boy Advance games with no comparison. Let's take a quick look and see how it compares to some other devices I have around the house. Here's the Powkiddy RGB30. Which people refer to as the poor man's Analogue Pocket. I don't think they're even on the same planet personally, but one is much more expensive than the other. Now the Miu Mini Plus and Anbernic RG35XX to show you comparison between the lowest budget options for these systems compared to the Pocket, which is the highest end. And it's the same idea, there's no comparison here. Not that it would be expected. Honestly, I don't have a single comparison in my collection to this screen. It's just that good. You would think that it stops there, but there's one other thing that really impresses me, and that's the sound and audio. The speakers are fantastic, and you wouldn't think so considering that the speakers are actually on the sides of the device, pointing outwards. But it really gives you some awesome sound, so let's have a quick listen to Pokemon Prism. Otherwise, on the front here, we have the D-pad, 4 face buttons, start and select, and the Analogue Pocket button for menu. The face buttons themselves have been great. I don't have a concern, and they've been working out well. The top X and Y buttons are concave, and they feel fantastic. And then in contrast, the A and B buttons are just a normal button with a rounded feeling. The D-pad isn't perfect. I've fallen to the camp where I actually don't mind this D-pad at all and find it to be pretty nice, but it's not the best out there. Let's do a quick false diagonal test in Pokemon to see if the character moves in different directions than what I'm pushing down on. And it does, so you'll likely see false diagonals here if that's something you're susceptible to. As well, if you push down on the left and right D-pad buttons, you can move the character up and down too, which is not something you want to see. In my use cases, I haven't had a concern, but others might. Now, one thing I do want to mention that's a comparison to the black model that I had is that the material they actually used for the shell, the buttons, and all of that is a lot softer than the black was. The D-pad on the black was way sharper than it is here, and everything on this entire device just feels a lot more smooth, sanded, and rounded off. In my mind, the transparent blue here was 1000% worth the extra money over the black due to that fact alone. Alright, so I'm gushing a little bit here, and mostly because I actually really love this device. I've been using it daily since I got it, the black version and now the blue version, and I can't go back to playing Game Boy games any other way. This device quickly became one of my favorite devices that I own. So let's talk about my actual use cases here, because I have a lot of devices, so where does this actually fit in? Now, I like retro achievements, and this doesn't have Wi-Fi or retro achievements at all. So I have to be a little bit picky with what I put on this device until I get my retro achievements in other games. So for me, this device has been a ROM hack game device. I just continually load up ROM hacks on this device and then just go ahead and play them since a lot of them don't have retro achievements. But sometimes I just play a game on here because I love the screen and I really want to play on the screen. So I mentioned it before, but I don't actually play any of my actual game carts on this device. I actually prefer emulation here. And you can achieve that using what's called OpenFPGA on this device. Inside of that menu, you can add a whole bunch of different platforms to emulate. But I basically keep Genesis, Master System, NES, SNES, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and Game Gear on here. There's a lot more that you can add if you wanted to. And so these are using the Mr. FPGA cores, if you're familiar with that. So some may not have save states, or as Analogue calls it, memories, although the Game Boys do. And their idea of emulation is to get as close to native hardware as you can. So this is quite a bit different than something like RetroArch, for example. Now, none of this came out of the box. I used a program called Pocket Sync to add all of these emulator cores. Then I added my own ROMs and all of that fun stuff directly to the SD card. It was an extremely easy process and I think anybody could follow it. The result is I can pick up my Pocket, jump into a Game Boy game, load my memory or save state, and off I go. Or if I wanted to, use the actual in-game save. Game Boy Advance takes a bit of time to load into, but otherwise I've had zero issues playing anything here. The games run great, sound great, and feel great, and I absolutely love this. Okay, let's rant for a bit, and I want to talk about Analogue as a whole, as a company, and what they're offering here. So first off, the price is going to be the biggest detractor for a lot of people, especially at $219 or $249 US. Now, personally, having used both the black and blue version, I would say for me it's 100% worth it and I'm super happy that I bought it. But this is a niche device for a niche person that has a lot of disposable income. However, my main problems with Analogue are all of it outside of the hardware. So let's start with shipping. Analogue is absolutely out of their minds for what they're charging to ship to Canada, and even in some cases to the US, and then the other parts of the world. Canadians, I hope you're sitting down for this, but I paid $60 US to ship this device to my house, and then it gets better. They used UPS, and if you're at all familiar with UPS shipping from US to Canada, you get charged duties and taxes on top as well, which for me was another $22 US to Alberta, which if you're in British Columbia or Ontario, good luck because you have higher taxes and it's going to be a lot more. It's absolutely bonkers that a company like Analogue can get away with charging $60 US to ship this across the border. I've bought a lot of devices off the Discord from people on the marketplace, shipping from the US to Canada and elsewhere, and not once have I paid anywhere near that. And that's just random people. These are just people that are going to a UPS store and shipping it, or their local postal office. So they don't have any contacts for discounts and shipping and all of that Analogue likely does. So I don't know what they're trying to do or why they're doing it, but they really need to fix their whole shipping problem. Now, for the actual device, I do think that $219 or $249 is fair for what you're getting here, especially if you use it for its intended purpose, which is playing actual native carts. Then you add in the screen and the battery, which we didn't even talk about, but it's great. and the sound and all of that, and this is definitely worth the price. And so just continuing that thought, I have a very hard time supporting Analogue as a company given just their scummy business practices, because it goes further than shipping. This device was released in December of 2021, and we're here almost 2 years later. It's barely been in stock, very, very rarely in stock. It's been a scalper's wet dream for the last 2 years. And then what do they do after 2 years? They release a glow-in-the-dark variant that costs more. You have people waiting years to buy your black and white product at the price that you released at and promised, and then you go ahead and release a completely different variant, more expensive, and basically just say, screw you. All for a flavor of the month design just to make another $30 per unit. Sure. And then they did it again with the release of these transparent models just a month later, which is again $249. So it's like, what have you been doing this entire time? Because you've obviously held back stock to make a transparent version, the glow-in-the-dark version, and all of that. So is it just that you had trouble getting the white and black shells? Because then I would understand, but none of this really makes sense. Honestly, to me, it just feels like they went out to try and get more money from people without accurately explaining why, and it just feels gross. Especially when you have people that have been waiting a long time to just buy your product. The entire Analogue Pocket ordering process, shipping process, and all of that has just felt gross to me, and I don't like it. And so all of that rolls right into the software side, which again, I have no idea what they've been doing behind the scenes, but they haven't been working on this. One of the biggest features that they've been promising for years is being able to use display modes in OpenFPGA, which is emulation that we talked about earlier. And we finally just got an update this week that said, hey, yeah, it's coming by the end of this year. But we've heard this song and dance before. And when you couple that with the fact that we've seen no firmware updates since May, and then before that since January, I don't understand what they're doing there. This device isn't that perfect that you could allow such minimal updates. But here I am with a Blue Analogue Pocket, so I guess I'm part of the problem. And that sort of goes into my recommendation portion. Do I recommend this device? 100%. Do I recommend it to everybody? And no, not a chance. There's a very specific use case here that you have to be aware of if you want this device. Obviously, if you want to play your actual game carts, then there's no other option. This is the best. Also, do you have disposable income and you want to play Game Boy games on the best possible device? Then yeah, this would be it. Do you have an infinite amount of money? Then yeah, buy the new toy. But for everybody else that care about Wi-Fi, retro achievements, save states, emulation cores, RetroArch, and all of that stuff, then no, this isn't going to be for you. This is an extremely niche device for a niche audience, and I think the only reason it survived this long is 100% because of the screen. If this screen wasn't that good, I would have sold this device a long time ago. The screen really does the heavy lifting for this device. That's going to be it for this one. Let me know in the comments below. Do you have an Analogue Pocket? Is it on your list to try and get? Did you miss out on the transparent ones? This has been tough to get. The only way that you can get one now is really through eBay, and that just feels gross. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.